Hello everyone and welcome to SSC 465. My name is Dr. Lisa Johnson and I am the instructor for this class. The goals for this presentation are as follows. I want to provide an introduction to the course. I'm going to outline the portfolio expectations, discuss the public issue presentation, and explain the final capstone presentation. These are the main components of our class. I will also touch on expectations for our discussion boards. First of all, a little bit about me. I often refer to my family as the Johnson Family Zoo, so here is part of my zoo. I have 7 children, an amazing husband, 2 dogs, and I like to refer to my life as having a fair amount of chaos. I work as the Director of Student Support Services at Methodist College, and then I teach the Capstone course and have been doing so for 5 years. I also have a part-time nonprofit job. So I work out in the community serving a population of vulnerable individuals. First of all, I want to talk about the portfolio. This is something you have been working on a little bit over your entire time at Methodist, and the culmination of that portfolio happens in the Capstone course. So one of the main components of the Capstone portfolio is writing a reflection, and it's my hope that now that you've gotten to this point, your last semester of your degree at Methodist, you've written several reflections by this time, but I want to take a brief moment to review what should go into a solid reflection. As you know, our reflections are centered around the 3 educated citizen goals of effective communicator, reflective individual, and change agent. So the first thing to do is when you begin your reflection, it's always good to state the educated citizen goal that you will be addressing. Second, in about 3/4 of a page, share the story that you feel like is the foundation of how you came to embrace and know and practice the educated citizen goal. Maybe that's something from your work experience, perhaps. It is something that you experience outside of work, or maybe it's an experience that happened embedded in a course at Methodist. After you tell the story of your experience and how you practice that educated citizen goal, then you want to analyze that experience using some of the language directly from the educated citizen goals. I have posted on our course site the language of all of the educated citizen goals. So for example, if you're talking about an effective communicator experience, it would be important in your analysis to include things like verbal and nonverbal communication, communication with speakers of other languages. If you're discussing reflective individual, you might be talking about things like practicing critical thinking, making correct connections across disciplines. Finally, you'll want to explain in the last part of the paper how you plan to continue to embrace these educated citizen goals in your future work. In total, this should be about 2 to 3 pages double-spaced. So as part of one of the main expectations of this course is that you will turn in your final capstone presentation. And on this slide, you will see the components of that final portfolio. You will have reflections related to the reflective individual, the effective communicator, and the change agent. Portfolios are submitted online to our Brightspace course as a PDF. Here are the items that are included in that portfolio. First of all, it will be a title page, and the title page should include your name, your degree, and many students title it as the Educated Citizen Portfolio. Next, you need a table of contents, which will outline all of the components of your portfolio. Next are the reflections. Now, depending on your degree program, you will have a different number of reflections in your portfolio. So if you're a member of the RN to BSN program, where you spend a shorter amount of time at Methodist, you will only be submitting 6 reflections: 2 effective communicator, 2 reflective individual, and 2 change agent. If you are in a health professions degree, including things like radiology, sonography, healthcare administration, then you will have 12 reflections. Or if you're part of the traditional BSN program, then you also have 12. And then in that case, you'd have 4 effective communicator, 4 reflective individual, and 4 change agent. Another component of the portfolio is a resume, or another word for a resume is a CV, a curriculum vitae. And then as part of the portfolio assignment, you can choose to write an additional 5 to 6 page reflection called the critical reflection paper. What this paper does is it's meant to show your growth from the beginning of the time at Methodist to the end. And it reflects on how you've grown as an effective communicator, reflective individual, and change agent holistically. So it's not just a rehashing of the same reflections that you have submitted in the portfolio, but it's meant to take a more holistic look at how you've grown in your time at Methodist. This is an optional critical reflection paper. If you choose to go after this optional requirement and you submit a portfolio with a solid critical reflection, then on graduation day, you will be announced as your name and then portfolio of distinction. Portfolios are, once you've submitted the portfolio, those portfolios are distributed across the college, and multiple people from across disciplines will read the portfolios and respond to you. The public issue assignments. So one of the things that we spend the most amount of time on in this course is our public issue assignments. So early on in the course, you will select a public issue that is an interest or relevance to you, your community that you live in, or your career, or just a passion that you have. It should be something that is relevant today. You'll work with this same issue throughout your time in the course. So, for example, if you choose childhood poverty, all of the assignments that you complete related to the public issue will be all tied to that same topic. This is a fairly large assignment, and so it's broken into several smaller parts. And so that is why you will see throughout the course that you'll be submitting during various times, these public issue assignments. And each public issue paper helps you to take a particular focused look at the issue in a variety of ways. And I'm going to break those down for you here shortly. Here we go. Public issue paper 1. So once you submit your public issue, you can begin doing research. Public issue 1 is related to setting the stage for your public issue. So in this paper, you state the problem that you chose, define the problem, and one might think like it seems straightforward, childhood poverty. It's something that when you say it, probably us as individuals who are invested in healthcare education would know what that might mean. But it's important to define the public issue so that others who may not have the same kind of access to healthcare knowledge that you do, or the same experiences, would understand the perspective that you are bringing when you discuss the issue. You're also going to talk about the scope, how widespread the problem is, the intensity, how bad the problem is, duration, which is related to the history of the problem, demographics, and current resources available related to the topic. Demographics specifically is something that I encourage you to take a really close look at, because not all public issues affect all demographic groups equally. So when you discuss the demographics related to your issue, I'd like you to explore all of the following areas that are relevant to your topic, including race, ethnicity, age, gender, sexuality, ability, religion, education, and class. So depending on your issue, not all of those demographic categories will be relevant, but any that are, I encourage you to look at those. So for example, childhood poverty, I'll revisit that public issue again. Because you're addressing childhood poverty, age won't be quite as relevant because your paper is specifically focusing on children. So you may still focus on age, but you would be looking at a smaller span of years. Whereas if you took on the issue of diabetes, you would need to spend some time looking at age, like what are the instances of diabetes in children, adults, and the elderly population. Or for an issue like sex trafficking, you would focus on the instances that sex trafficking occurs in different racial groups, ethnicities, ages, genders, possibly sexuality. But in that case, perhaps religion may not come into play quite as much. So as you can see, depending on the public issue, some of these demographic groups will be more relevant than others. The paper shouldn't be less than 3 pages. Many people, for this paper, the paper becomes quite extensive, but I would say that the paper shouldn't be less than 3 pages. It is very difficult to effectively address all of those things in anything less than that. You may go over as much as you need to adequately and effectively answer all of those questions. In public issue assignment 2, you move on to look at how the public issue is kind of being addressed currently. This includes things like laws and policies that are related to your issue. If there are any actions in the works, like sometimes there may be a bill that's being put forward related to your issue. Maybe there's been some recent petitions. It really depends on what your issue is. Sometimes there may be policies in place in a particular workplace that might be relevant. What government agencies are involved in addressing this issue? What's being done globally, nationally, and in other states? And then you want to compare that to what's happening locally. So I recognize that not all of the people in this class are here in Nebraska. And so if you choose a public issue that's relevant where you live, one of the things that I ask you to do is compare where you live to what's being done somewhere else. So if you are here in Nebraska, maybe you want to take a look at how Iowa is addressing the issue, or California, or perhaps if you're not here in Nebraska, maybe you're in Minnesota or some other place in the United States, you may want to compare where you are at to Nebraska. This paper should be 2 to 3 pages in length, and again, if it goes over that, that is fine, but it should not be less than 2 to 3 pages. Published issue paper 3 is often the one that can cause some challenges. This paper begins with a very brief look at any local things that are being done that you haven't already addressed. So like, let's say you're, again, working on the issue of childhood poverty. You may look at what nonprofits are doing in your local area, and then you want to look at where the gaps exist. So in your research, you likely will come across like things that are not going well related to your public issue. So what are those gaps in services to particular populations? Or maybe there's a particular demographic group that's being underserved or more significantly impacted by the public issue. So in that case, that would be a gap. So again, I want to reiterate, the beginning of paper 3 addresses any gaps that exist. And then you move on to discussing 2 unique ways that you think the public issue could be addressed. So, for example, maybe you feel like a law needs to be passed that changes some sort of approach to how this public issue is managed. So in your idea, you're going to discuss how you come about initiating a bill that eventually will become a law. Maybe you feel like we need another nonprofit. Maybe you'd like to take on a promotional campaign of sorts, like a social media campaign. So what goes into that? And when you discuss your public issues, I encourage you to be specific. How will you get the word out about your solution? Where will the funding come from? What are the likely outcomes? Maybe you have found a state that has something that's working really well and you want to recreate that here. How did that state get that idea started? What are the pros and cons of each of the ideas that you have proposed? So that's the public issue assignments. These all lead up to getting you ready to do your public issue presentation, which you will record and post as a link to our course page. You will prepare a 10 to 15 minute presentation that highlights all of the key pieces of your public issue papers. So once you have those public issue papers written, you will take components of the papers and put those into a PowerPoint presentation. So you'll discuss things like define the issue, discuss the scope, intensity, the demographics, any policies and laws that are in place, what's being done globally, nationally, what other states are doing, and then you're going to describe your ideas for approaching the issue. So that's what goes into that 10 to 15 minute presentation. So again, you'll record yourself using Yuja or some other recording software, whatever you're most comfortable with. So for example, right now I am using my iPad and I'm just doing screen recording. While I'd love to see your faces for this public issue presentation, it is not necessary for us to see your faces. Once you have the recording completed, you will share the link in a discussion board on our course site. And along with your link, I'm going to ask you to post 2 questions. And then, as part of our discussion assignment for that week, you will view others' presentations and respond to the questions that they have posed related to their public issue presentations. And you'll just generally provide some feedback related to the presentations that you watch. So I will then be asking you, as I said, to watch others' presentations and respond to those questions as part of the discussion for that week. So I've discussed the portfolio and the public issue presentation. Now I'm moving on to the capstone presentation, which is probably something you've heard about quite a lot. It's the culmination of your time really at Methodist. The capstone presentation is a 12 to 15 minute presentation and it is a graduation requirement. The presentation consists of, so there's some parts of it, a short discussion of the public issue. So you're going to spend about just a really short period of time talking about the public issue that you presented in class. But the bulk of the presentation is related to 6 reflections. So for those of you in the RN to BSN program, you will be likely using all of the reflections that you wrote as part of your portfolio in this presentation. For those of you in Allied Health or in the traditional BSN program, you will be selecting 6 of the reflections that you have already written, and they will be part of this public issue presentation. I will provide samples and more information, but this presentation is more just an overview of what the assignments are. So, to help you get ready for that presentation, you will complete an outline, and you'll submit that to me for feedback. You will also have the opportunity to do a rough draft presentation PowerPoint, and you can send that in to me at least 1 week prior to your presentation, and then I will provide you feedback on that rough draft PowerPoint. This is optional, so submitting the PowerPoint to me is not a requirement, but a lot of students do and choose to do so that they get some feedback to make sure that their presentation is as good as possible. Then you will record yourself using a recording app that allows both your presentation content and your face to be visible. Usually allows this, but there are other screen reading apps out there that allow you to both show your face and your content. This is a critical component of this presentation. You will be assessed on being visible in that presentation, and so think about right now early on how you will make that happen. If you don't have an iPad, you don't have a webcam, then please reach out to me so that I can help you get access to the technology you will need to be able to make this happen, where we will be able to see both you and your presentation. Ultimately, you will upload a link to our course site, and that is what you will be turning in for your capstone presentation. A little bit more about the presentation specifically. Again, it's 12 to 15 minutes in length. The first 2 minutes are that component where you discuss the public issue and your why for choosing that public issue. Then you'll have a smooth transition into the second part of that presentation, which is a discussion of your reflections. Because really the goal of the capstone presentation is for the panelists who assess this to see how you've grown and how you are able to make connections with the experiences you've had as a student to the educated citizen goals, and how those have helped you become the person you are today, prepared to graduate and continue to be an educated citizen in your career going forward, hopefully. So in that reflection component of the presentation, you will discuss 2 reflections from each area: effective communicator, reflective individual, and change agent. You will share the story briefly, analyze what you learned from that, and then the most difficult thing for most students is then to tie that back to the public issue that you talked about. For example, so because I had this particular experience as an effective communicator, I am equipped to address my public issue of, for example, childhood poverty again, and then you're going to talk about how you will practice effective communication, reflective individual, and change agent, how you could use those to address your public issue. And then you have a conclusion. So that's the main part of the capstone presentation. I will provide samples so you can watch others' presentations. I will provide you with a template of the PowerPoint so that you have hopefully a solid understanding of what goes into this presentation. Finally, the other component of our class is our class discussions. So some weeks there will be discussions and some weeks there will not be. During week 1, when you are introducing yourself and disclosing your public issue, you do not need to respond to others. But in other weeks, I ask that you make an initial post and engage with at least 2 classmates. Your initial post should be completed by Friday of that week, and then you should complete your responses to classmates by Sunday. Your post will be assessed using the following structure. You will earn 3 points for your initial post. So if you provide a strong initial post that addresses the prompt in a thoughtful way, then you will earn those 3 points, and then you will earn 1 additional point for responding to at least 2 classmates, for a total of 5 possible points per week, with the exception of the final discussion when you're engaging with the public issue presentations, which do take more time for you. And in that week, your discussion will be worth your discussion post will be worth 10 points, because it will take more time to engage in that discussion. So those are the main components of the course. I encourage you, if you have questions, to please reach out to me. If something on the course site doesn't seem to be looking right or is confusing, please send me a text, send me an email, and I try to respond to those as quickly as possible. Usually within 24 hours, with the exception of weekends. Sometimes there's a little bit longer time responding. I do often do most of my grading over the weekends, so you can look for your feedback often to come in over the weekends, and then usually I'm able to provide feedback within 1 week of your submission of your assignments. If you have any questions, again, please reach out.